On an alternate version of Earth, humanity starts developing robots with an advanced AI, called simulants or just Sims. They quickly become part of everyday life, so to make them more human-like, people volunteer to have their faces scanned and recreated on robots. Soon the Sims aren't just workers, they're also companions, sports players, and even law enforcement. In 2055, a nuclear warhead detonates in Los Angeles because of a Sim created by the government, incinerating nearly 1 million people. The Western world comes together to ban any use of AI, but New Asia still supports and even keeps Sims as equal citizens. The United States begins a mission to eradicate all Sims and is constantly attacking New Asia to achieve its means. Their most important weapon is the Nomad, a massive space station created to scan the grounds for signs of Sims and quickly wipe them out. The army's main objective is to find someone called Nirmata, the leader and scientist behind the AI advancements. 10 years later, a group of American soldiers appears on the coast of New Asia while Nomad scans the area from the sky. Nearby, Joshua lives with his pregnant wife Maya, who has a very particular tattoo. Suddenly they hear a noise, so Joshua puts on his robotic limbs to go investigate and find their Sim friends. They're a group of guards led by Haroon, and they've brought an American soldier named Drew after they found him sneaking into the area. A Sim beats Drew up to make him talk, but Drew doesn't say a word, and the Nomad is coming closer. The group decides it's time to leave and find a new hideout, so Haroon's group rushes to prepare the boats while Maya packs. Once he's alone, Joshua scolds Drew for not giving him more time. It turns out he's also an American soldier on an undercover mission, and he's married Maya because she's Nirmata's daughter. As the Sim soldiers meet with the American ones and a gunfight starts outside, Joshua grabs Drew's radio and asks the commander to stop the raid because Nirmata isn't there with them. This is overheard by Maya, who is very upset to hear Joshua didn't really leave the army like he promised and points her gun at him, only to be interrupted by the soldiers who drag Joshua out of the house. Maya runs away and joins the Sims on the boats, but at that moment, Nomad launches a missile that kills them all. 5 years later, Joshua is back in the USA trying to keep up with civilian life. He takes lots of medicine for his PTSD and regularly sees a therapist, who uses a lie detector to make sure he doesn't hide information. He's got a job at Ground Zero as part of the cleaning crew, and one afternoon, he and his workmate find a robot that suddenly comes alive. It shakes all its limbs as it begs for mercy and causes the workmate to panic over how real it sounds, but Joshua immediately shuts it off and reminds his co-worker that they're just machines with no feelings. All the robots they find are taken to be destroyed. Sometime later at home, Joshua watches videos of Maya while remembering the time she customized his robotic limbs. He shared that he lost them when the nuke went off in LA, and that day he lost his whole family too. Afterward he goes for a swim, only to suddenly be approached by General Andrews and Colonel Howell, who want him to help with a mission. They've learned that Nirmata is developing a superweapon that can potentially destroy Nomad, and without that ship the USA would lose the war. Joshua is the only one who knows the layout of the lab, so he should guide a team to destroy that superweapon. At first Joshua refuses, pointing out how they wouldn't be in this situation if they hadn't blown up his mission and reminding them they killed his wife. However, he quickly changes his mind when Howell shows him a holographic video to prove that Maya is still alive and working with the superweapon. In the middle of the night, Joshua joins Howell's team and they fly to New Asia. After Nomad scans the area, the team lands on a field and Joshua takes them in the direction of the lab, only to discover they've built a village on top of it. The soldiers decide to invade and begin interrogating the locals, keeping them on their knees at gunpoint. McBride threatens to shoot a child's dog, causing the little girl to cry and shake her arm. Joshua realizes she's pointing at an altar, and when he twists a totem, the entrance to the lab appears. McBride and Bradbury stay outside, as guards and the rest of the team enters the lab, where they go through a long corridor to find the technicians and shoot them all down. Joshua checks the security cameras and sees Maya should be around too. The team keeps going to shoot more scientists, but this time the workers lock the bulletproof doors. Joshua explains the locks can only be opened with facial recognition. So one of the soldiers grabs a knife to take the face of a dead technician. Meanwhile Bradbury sees the police approaching, so she shoots up a few missiles before pretending to surrender. The cops try to arrest her, but at that moment Bradbury's missiles land and instantly kill all the Sims. Unfortunately soon more cops arrive and open fire on her, so she has to take cover. The team manages to go further into the lab and finds a vault that needs to be hacked to access. Shipley and Joshua stay to work on it while the others run to fight the incoming guards, however they soon begin losing men and Shipley rushes to help them. When the computer finally finishes hacking the lock, the vault opens Joshua and goes inside, only to find a couch with a kid watching TV. Joshua is shocked to discover the child is a Sim, which was never done before. Suddenly a scientist appears behind him and shoots him before opening an emergency exit for the kid, telling her to find Nirmata. The kid comes out of the lab and watches the outside world for the first time, but she also sees lots of fighting in the field. Joshua follows her out and tries to look for Maya among the running scientists to no avail. The rest of the team goes back to the plane, explaining they lost the fight and they need to go before Nomad fires. However Howell wants to check on something first and leaves. Bradbury tries to come back too and runs as fast as possible, but something hits her on the back. She still manages to get on the plane before it takes off, only to discover there's a bomb attached to her body, and it explodes in the middle of the air. The plane crashes nearby right before Nomad bombs the area, knocking Joshua. The next morning, Joshua wakes up on a boat and notices the robot girl staring at him. He throws a rock at her to make her leave, but the girl simply throws it back at him. Then Joshua investigates the area and finds a wounded Shipley, so he picks him up and takes him to an empty home to avoid the cops that are searching the area. Suddenly they hear a noise and discover the kid has followed them and is now watching TV. Joshua turns it off, but the kid turns it back on by just making a gesture with her hands, making Joshua realize she is the superweapon. At that moment Joshua's communicator rings with a call from Howell, which gets the attention of a farmer Sim nearby. Joshua tells Howell about the kid and the colonel orders him to kill her, but their conversation is cut off when Howell is surrounded by cops. She immediately gets arrested and thrown in a van with McBride and Officer Bowie. Back to Joshua, he hesitates to shoot a child and puts down his gun when he notices the girl is drawing Maya's tattoo. Suddenly they're found by the farmer, who promises to protect Alfie. Joshua's translator reveals the Sim's plan, so he quickly shoots first, killing the farmer but also alerting the cops of their location. Then Joshua asks Alfie where he can find Maya, and the child says she's in Diendang. At that moment the cops surround the house and open fire, so Joshua drags Shipley and the girl into the farmer's truck. When the police throw a grenade at them, a dog grabs it and takes it back outside, blowing up all the cops and barking and the remaining pieces. Then the girl uses her power to activate the truck and the group manages to escape. Meanwhile McBride and Howell team up to kill Bowie and take over the van, turning it around to go looking for Joshua. Sometime later, Shipley points a gun at Joshua to ask for a hospital, but Joshua explains they're too far from an American base and he'll take him to see a friend. Unfortunately Shipley's wounds are too serious and he dies in the truck. At that moment, Joshua notices a car approaching, so he hides the girl's robotic head with a hat, and since she doesn't have a name, he calls her Alfie because her ear says Alpha Omega. When the car stops, Joshua approaches the driver with his gun to demand a ride to the city. Moments later, McBride and Howell find the abandoned car and Shipley's body. Howell uses a device to transfer Shipley's consciousness into Bowie's Sim body for 30 seconds, but Shipley panics when he sees his own body and only manages to say Joshua was taking him to see a friend before dying again. In the evening, the car is stopped at a checkpoint because the authorities have received wanted posters for Joshua and Alfie. Joshua hides in the back of the car, but a cop sees Alfie and asks her to take off her hat. Alfie uses her power to cause a blackout in the area, then she distracts everyone with some sparks on a sign and activates the car again, controlling it to successfully drive into the city and escape from the cops. Their escape is shared on the police frequency, so Howell and McBride learn of it as well. Meanwhile, an officer who shares Bui's face from the same donor finds the bodies by the road. Later in the city, Joshua tries to ask Alfie where Dian Dang is, but Alfie won't answer. At that moment the cops show up, so Joshua drags Alfie into the train to escape. Joshua sees other women that look like Maya, but they're just Sims wearing her donated face. During the trip, Alfie asks many existential questions, so Joshua explains that good people go to heaven. He doesn't think he's good enough for it, and Alfie doesn't think she can go either because she isn't a person. After falling asleep, Joshua thinks of the day Drew gave him the mission to marry Maya to get intel. He also gave him a wedding ring that had a special tracker inside. In the evening, the duo leaves the train and see their wanted posters all over the city screens. While a citizen notices them and calls the police, Joshua takes Alfie to a sim factory to see his friend, who turns out to be Drew. After the night of the attack, Drew changed his mind and now he's pro-AI, to the point he's dating a sim called Cammy. Joshua asks Drew to get Maya's location out of Alfie, but the kid is extremely encrypted. When Joshua asks him if he can track down Maya's ring instead, Drew mentions she's dead, but Joshua refuses to believe it. Afterward, while Cammy distracts Alfie, Drew tells Joshua the results of his inspection. Drew is capable of growing. Right now the range of her powers is limited, but that will grow too, and eventually she'll be able to control all technology remotely. At that moment, Alfie tells Cammy that someone is coming to get her. But Cammy checks and it's just the food delivery. After she closes the door, the delivery guy reveals to be the other Bui, who is joined by a bunch of cops before he activates a bomb inside the food box that kills Cammy. Then the cops come inside and try to get Alfie, but Joshua arrives and starts shooting them all down while Alfie calmly watches TV. Joshua shoots Bui's face and uses a cop's own gun to defeat the remaining Sims, but he can hear more police vehicles approaching. He grabs Alfie and a grieving Drew to escape right before the cops arrive, and while the Sims search the building, two cops reveal to be Howell and McBride. Howell takes Cammy's head, planning to hack into her too. Sometime later, Drew's computer tracks the ring and finds it in Joshua's old home. When they get there, Joshua immediately enters the house, only to find the ring on the flooded floor. While he watches the security recording of the attack, Alfie comes to warn him that the soldiers are coming, but Joshua snaps and yells at her. Alfie starts crying and Joshua finally sees her as a person, so he hugs her as he apologizes. Suddenly Drew comes in to warn them of the attack, but he gets shot down. Before dying, he reveals to Joshua that Maya is Nirmata. That's why they attacked 5 years ago. They weren't allowed to tell Joshua because of his love for her. Joshua tries to run away with Alfie, but they're immediately surrounded by Sim soldiers led by Haroon, and Joshua is knocked out. That night Joshua dreams of when he met Maya at a bar and the story she shared. His father had taught her all about AI, but he had to flee after the war started. So she was raised by the simulants, who loved her as much as a human would. The next morning, Joshua wakes up in a cell inside a ship. Haroon comes to see him and explains a few more things. Maya's father was the original Nirmata, but after he died she became the new one and created Alfie to stop Nomad. The nuclear bombing in LA was caused by a programming error from the humans, and they blamed the machine for the mistake. If the Sims win the war, they don't plan to do anything to the Western world, they just want to live in peace. The army is using Joshua's wish to see Maya to make him guide them to her. Haroon considers killing Joshua, but he's interrupted by some noise outside. Nomad is blowing up their base. Joshua convinces Alfie to help him escape, and he jumps into the sea, so the soldiers shoot into the water. Once they think Joshua is dead, the boat takes off, unaware that Joshua is hiding underneath. When they make it to the city, Joshua sneaks around and watches the Sim and humans live in harmony. People even grieve for fallen robots. And a Sim teacher tells the kids about peaceful coexistence. In the evening, Joshua waits for Haroon to fall asleep and presses a button in his head to put him on standby. Joshua tries to escape with Alfie on a boat, but at the moment an alarm announces the arrival of the Americans. Huge tanks begin destroying the buildings and shooting missiles, and after seeing this, Alfie leaves Joshua because she wants to help her people. Death and destruction take over the area with both sides losing many soldiers. Howl sends a very basic robot through the bridge and the robot explodes, to kill even more soldiers. Then Howl sends a second walking bomb, but this one is stopped by Alfie, who shuts it down with her powers. Unfortunately, McBride appears and shoots Alfie down, so a furious Joshua jumps in to kill him. With Alfie unconscious, the bomb activates again, so Joshua runs with the kid before the bridge gets destroyed. Haroon agrees to take Joshua to see Nirmata to fix Alfie while the others keep on fighting. Not far from there, Howl rebuilds Cammy to hurt her for information, then she kills her again. During the trip, Haroon reveals that Maya finished Alfie a few days before the attack and scanned her own embryo to make her, meaning Alfie, is a copy of Joshua's dead baby. Eventually Alfie is taken by some monks into a special temple, and Joshua asks if this place is Diendang. The monk explains that the word means heaven, meaning Maya is dead. A devastated Joshua enters the temple and finds a recovered Alfie resting next to Maya's body, which is connected to a machine. Another monk explains Maya has been like that for 5 years, but she isn't really alive, the machine just keeps the body working. The Sims aren't allowed to hurt Nirmata, so it's up to Joshua to finally disconnect her. Crying, Joshua apologizes for everything and turns the machine off. At that moment the Americans arrive and start killing all the Sims in the area. Howl enters the temple and while keeping Joshua at gunpoint, she begins downloading Maya's consciousness into a chip. Haroon also shows up and shoots Howl, causing 2 other soldiers to shoot him in return. Howl comes closer to check on him, but it turns out she has a bomb on her back that Alfie activates to kill her and both soldiers. Then Haroon stands up and tells Joshua to destroy Nomad, so Joshua leaves with Alfie and Maya's chip. Unfortunately they're immediately found by the Americans, who separate them before taking them away while Nomad blows up the area. Later in the LA base, Andrews tells Joshua to kill Alfie because they can't get any information out of her. Joshua comes closer and whispers something to Alfie, causing her to go off. Seeing her vitals drop on the screen, Andrews assumes she's dead. Afterward, Joshua takes Alfie to the incinerator, but on their way there, Alfie reveals to be fine. Joshua had just asked her to get on standby mode. The girl uses her powers to make the vehicle crash and block the road, giving Joshua time to take her out and escape. The duo runs to the spaceport, where Alfie uses her powers to make the boarding machine let them pass. As they escape on a plane, Andrews sends orders to the pilot to make them fly back. However, Alfie uses her powers again and guides the plane toward Nomad. After all the civilians come off the plane, the guards come inside, but Joshua opens the door to create a vacuum, causing all the guards to get ejected into the sky. Afterward Joshua prepares an explosive, so Andrews responds by preparing a massive attack on all the Sim bases. When Joshua sees the missiles getting ready, he gives Maya's chip to Alfie and tells her to stop the attack while he installs the explosive. Alfie runs through a few corridors until she reaches the right room and uses her power to stop all the missiles just in time, while Joshua installs the bomb that will explode in 10 minutes. Alfie starts running back, but she takes the wrong corridor and finds a room full of sleeping Sims, including one that looks like Maya. She immediately takes her out and installs the chip, but unfortunately it doesn't work. At that moment a few missiles do manage to fall and destroy some robot villages. Joshua's suit is running out of oxygen, but Alfie shows up and takes him to a room with air while she prepares the escape pod. A furious Andrews releases his last weapon, a giant octopus-like robot that captures Alfie. Joshua quickly shuts down the escape pod and the door cuts off the robot's tentacles, freeing Alfie. As Andrews prepares another massive attack, the robot captures Joshua, but Alfie uses her powers and makes it drop Joshua before making it fall. The pod's door was broken during the attack, so while the duo struggles with it, the bomb finally goes off. As the Nomad begins exploding, the attacks are cancelled and the missiles land without blowing up. With no more time, Joshua tells Alfie that he'll meet her in heaven before releasing the pod. Then Joshua leaves the room to wait for the end, only to find the Maya Sim working. The lovers run toward each other and meet with a kiss before the explosion kills them both. Alfie's pod safely lands on Earth and she joins the celebration of the simulants, who are finally free.